Hey, who's out there homeschooling high schoolers or planning and looking ahead to homeschooling high school? Today I am going to be talking about one of Sonlight's high school programs, specifically the 200 level, which focuses on church history and classic literature. I'm so excited to share this program with you today. I think it's one of my all-time favorite Sonlight HBL programs. I read all of these books when I was growing up. I have read many of them again since. We had the older version, and this year we upgraded it to the newer teacher guides and upgraded a few new books that were added in. But I'm going to walk you on a very detailed look through just 1 week in the program to give you an idea of how it handles history, how it handles literature, as well as writing instruction and Bible. All of these topics are covered by Sonlight HBLs in their high school levels. I'm excited to show you a look inside right now. Now, it's important to note for the high school levels of Sonlight, all the 100, 200, 300 levels, there is a parent guide and a student guide, and there is also a history guide and a literature guide. So they've separated it out into different manuals. And these years can be done independently by the student. This is not intended to be necessarily the parent reading aloud to the student anymore, like it is with earlier levels of Sonlight. This is the student reading to themselves and doing responding to the literature themselves. But they can still be having discussions with the parent, and of course the parent could still read these books if they want to, and you may very well want to. So we actually just bought the parent guide versions for history and for literature. We didn't buy the student guide versions. The big difference between the two of them is that the parent guide version has the answers. Because of the need to save space in our suitcases with living overseas and just saving money in general, we were pretty happy with just having the parent guide option, having the answers available for the questions versus needing separate guides. So that's the option we took, but that's not necessarily the normal way to do it. So I'm going to walk you through what your student will be reading from during a week. You have a reading from the Westminster Shorter Catechism to be completed, and here's that book. So in this book you have a question, and then you have commentary on the question, which sometimes includes interesting visual cartoons, and then at the end of the question you have all of these questions that are meant to be answered based on the readings that you were done, review questions. So it's typically 1 to 2 sections of this in a week. Then you have another book that's being read. This is not the same book for the whole year. There are several different books, but at this point it is What If Jesus Had Never Been Born by Dr. James Kennedy. I'll just give you a look inside this. The impact of Jesus on history and society. Then you are also reading from the Bible and doing Bible memorization. You can tell that there are just short amounts of reading for each day. It's not a very, very heavy load of reading. Then the other 2 books that you read from, and these are spines, which take you quite a bit of the year to complete. There are other spines that are included. One is DK's The Story of Christianity, which has a lot of pictures throughout, very, very interesting. I'll show you elements of this. The Story of Christianity. And then at this point you're also reading the 100 Most Important Events in Christian History. This one also includes some pictures and short readings about each event that is being covered, and dates. So that's your weekly schedule, but do be aware you have a lot more. Well, I feel like this is always the part we see of Sonlight and that we know of Sonlight, but the instructor guides include a lot more. There's also an optional text, which we don't have, and to stay in touch with what's going on in the world, the typical assignment is to do 3 short current event reports this week. And these are not explained in this week because this assignment is repeated again and again, basically just about every week, I think. This is week 12. So then we have our notes. So there's notes on pretty much every reading. There's notes on the words covered in the readings, any type of vocabulary words. There are questions, and then there are answers, which this is the parent guide. That's why it has the answers. Questions and answers, questions and answers. Here we have vocabulary, definition of the vocabulary. So those are type words that a student might get hung up on. There's commentary and discussion points. So the way we actually use this, because my sister is very independent in her schoolwork, does her schoolwork independently, we don't tend to do any formal discussion so much. She just tends to read the discussion points to help get her thinking about what she's read. And she might bring them up or discuss them with mom if she wants to or if she finds a need to. But it's not necessarily any type of formal discussion or assigned discussion. Then you will notice for the history readings that there are timeline and map points. So Sonlight has a timeline, or you can use any timeline book, but you can be adding in historical events to the timeline throughout your time with Sonlight, and you can be using the same timeline over multiple years, continually filling it out, making it fuller and richer, seeing how different historical events line up. And there's also maps. So maps are where you can be finding where certain events occurred or where certain places are, just building your awareness of where cities are in the world. So they have specific maps that go with specific books. So all these little numbers correspond to the references right here. So if you're finding Byzantium, Moscow, you can find it easily on the maps. So there are several maps to go along with the books being read here. And then the what is being marked is slightly different depending on what events are being covered. So very detailed map. And then your kids could be making notes on the map. They could be coloring it, or they could just literally just use it as a reference to be like, oh, okay, there's where Moscow is. So then we have notes for every different day's reading in the book. Depending on how complicated the reading is, there might be more or less notes. There's questions for digging deeper, questions just about, facts. Who was Desiderius Erasmus? We have extra thing. They really encourage you to think about what you read, engage with what you read, not just read it, check it off the list, and be done. So again, we have our timelines and map points, or here it looks like just timelines. Then that gets you through the history portion, that and the maps. Next, we have our literature and language arts. And here we're going through 2 different books. We have the Child's Anthology of Poetry, which it says child, but these are not the most childish or easiest poems necessarily. You can tell that our copy is pretty old, and you can tell that If has been dog-eared because it's so good. But these are longer poems. These are very classic poems. Ooh, Village Blacksmith. I mean, these are the poems that, yes, a child should grow up knowing. Lots of good ones. I like these classics. Brings back good memories. Then you're reading Pride and Prejudice. This is the copy that we have because we have an older Sonlight version. The current Sonlight version actually has an annotated Pride and Prejudice, which to me sounds like a very good idea to help a high school student not be so overwhelmed by the text. I do think that that's a good change that they made. But you can see that there are short sections, maybe a poem or 2 each day, and a short section of the reading. Then beyond that, for the language arts element of high school, so do notice for high school Sonlight, you don't necessarily have to be adding in extra language arts. There's a pretty hefty amount of writing opportunities in it. So for creative expression, we have What's Your Opinion? A persuasive essay, which is typically related to what you are reading. Then there's many times a second writing assignment, which is marked as optional in each week, and here it's a rebuttal. This rebuttal is actually a rebuttal essay against your persuasive essay, so challenging the student to develop an academic rebuttal to their own persuasive essay, which is a pretty creative challenge. Then we have some optional elements to add more to the language arts. One of those is the infamous in homeschooling circles, Worldly Wise. It doesn't specify a level. It could be whatever level is appropriate, whatever level your child is at. I just got out book 10 because your child would probably be in roughly 10th grade. And Worldly Wise is famous. It is vocabulary with multiple exercises to focus on vocabulary words. I did this when I was in high school and earlier than high school. It's a classic series. I always really enjoyed it. Not everybody does. Another option is Analogies 2, which I'm bummed I didn't bring it, but I used that when I was growing up as well. It is focusing on words and definitions through analogies, through that classic exercise of analogies. I really, really enjoyed analogies. I should have brought that, I'm sorry, but it's at my mom's place. Other parts in the schedule, so not this week 12 that I'm showing you, but other parts in the schedule in vocabulary from classical roots. They actually schedule the C level of vocabulary from classical roots, not B, but I have talked about this in other videos. I really like this. I probably, as a teacher, I think I like it more than I like Worldly Wise, because you really get to go into Greek and Latin roots of words. They sort them by root. It also has a teacher's guide, which gives more historical, literary references, interesting content. I really like this resource. B is the highest level we have, but I was actually telling my mom, hey, this is so good. We should probably get more of the levels. They have it all the way from 4, which is probably for 4th grade, all the way up to E. So those are really nice, worthwhile additions. If you're trying to just use Sonlight for your language arts, you very much can, especially if you want to add in things like analogies or vocabulary work. Then we have our notes again. So I would highly encourage the student and teacher not to ignore these. This is, I think, where Pride and Prejudice, the week where it's introduced. You'll spend a couple weeks reading it. Here it's being introduced. We're getting some background information here. Overview, characters, setting, point of view, conflict, theme. So we get all this background info when a new book is introduced, which is really helpful. It's kind of what a teacher would be doing in the classroom when introducing a new text, would be setting up the background of what this book is. This is something that they do at the high school level, not necessarily in the earlier levels of Sonlight. Then you continue to go through with vocabulary, with discussion questions. You go through each day. Then it's important to note that there are also typically notes for the poems from a child's anthology of poetry, which I find very helpful. And actually my sister had done a couple weeks of this new Sonlight before realizing that there were notes on the poetry, which made me laugh because I was just paging through and I'm like, oh, they have notes on the poems now. And she was like, what? Really? That's great, because the poem I read today, I didn't understand at all. And it was a very odd one. And they had a really great note that made it, oh, now I get it. So don't skip over the notes on poetry, because poetry can be a little challenging. After the notes on poetry is where you will find the explanation of the writing assignment for the week. Now, this is not the kind of writing assignment where they are going to break down every single thing step by step for you. This is meant to be a high school course, so they are expecting that students will have some kind of foundation in writing paragraphs, putting them together in a generally organized manner. But they give creative assignments typically they are often integrated with the readings, not always though, and they have a variety of assignments. So this is a persuasive essay, a very normal type of high school writing assignment, and they give ideas and suggestions for the persuasive essay, and at the end they give a rubric for the parent to grade with. So this is very helpful if you as a parent aren't really sure what to be looking for when you're grading a creative writing assignment or an academic writing assignment. They do include rubrics. This can help the student to know what standards they need to be meeting, what they should be including, but it can also be really helpful to the parent to know what should this look like to help give you some guidelines. So they have instructions for the creative writing assignment as well as for the optional writing assignment. So if you have a child who really can handle a challenge with writing, you can add in those optional writing assignments as well. We typically so far have just done one major, like one paper a week, because that feels like pretty much plenty for us. Our current high schooler has a pretty robust course load with a lot of science, with foreign language. She's doing a lot. So we're pretty content with typically 1 to 2 page essay a week. I do think that at some points in the program, they have longer or more in-depth projects that will last a couple weeks, but mostly they are shorter assignments that are once a week. All right, I hope it was helpful to get a full detailed look at what 1 week of Sonlight looks like in high school. Definitely head to their website to check out this level if you'd like to see more of all of the books and titles that they will be reading throughout the year, because this is of course a look at just 1 week, and they have quite a few really good books, well worth reading. If you have any more questions, please leave them for me in the comments down below. All right, I'll be seeing you. Bye.